that day thou shalt say, O Lord, I will praise thee, though thou wast angry with me. Thine anger is turned away, and thou comforted me. Behold, God is my salvation, I will trust and not be afraid. For the Lord is my strength and my song. He also is become my salvation. Therefore with joy shall ye draw water out of the wells of salvation, and in that day shall ye say, praise the Lord, call upon his name.
Hey, good morning. Welcome to Line by Line Bible Studies. Continuing today in Genesis chapter 45. We last time we left off, Joseph was about to reveal himself to his brothers. He'd tested them, we'll call it, tested them to see, will you leave, will you abandon your younger brother like you did to me? Have you, he wants to know what their state is. As far as, it doesn't spell it out, but, you could imagine he wants to know, do you regret that they Judah gives mouth to the feeling, when he says, now our iniquity is found out. God hath found out the iniquity of thy servants. Because that's what they're talking about. Because of what they knew what they did. We all have sins. But sometimes they're big sins. Like something like that. Things that really require major mercy, major forgiveness. If we can, that's one of the things is like that, there are, in the New Testament, it makes it very clear on many fronts. There are some things we would forgive, but there are other things where it's like you throw them out of church. And not that they can't be restored, but it's we don't accept certain things. They're worse. It's not just a slip up. Sometimes people are committed to the evil. You don't just throw your brother in the pit in a fit of anger, but sell him. There's a process going through. All right, verse 1. Then Joseph could not refrain himself before all them that stood by him. And he cried, Cause every man to go out from me. And there stood no man with him, while Joseph made himself known unto his brethren. And he wept aloud. And the Egyptians in the house of Pharaoh heard. And Joseph said unto his brethren, I am Joseph. Doth my father yet live? And his brethren could not answer him, for they were troubled at his presence. And Joseph said unto his brethren, Come near to me, I pray you. And they came near. And he said, I am Joseph your brother, whom you sold into Egypt. Now therefore be not grieved, nor angry with yourselves, that ye sold me hither. For God did send me before you to preserve life. For these 2 years hath the famine been in the land, and yet there are 5 years, in the which there shall neither be earing nor harvest. And God sent me before you to preserve you a posterity in the earth, and to save your lives by a great deliverance. So now it was not you that sent me hither, but God. And he hath made me a father to Pharaoh, and a Lord of all his house, and a ruler throughout all the land of Egypt. Haste ye and go up to my father, and say unto him, Thus saith thy son Joseph, God hath made me Lord of all Egypt. Come down unto me, tarry not. And thou shalt dwell in the land of Goshen, and thou shalt be near unto me, thou and thy children, and thy children's children, and thy flocks, and thy herds, and all that thou hast. And there will I nourish thee, for yet are 5 years of famine, lest thou and thy household and all that thou hast come to poverty. And behold, your eyes see, and the eyes of my brother Benjamin, that it is my mouth that speaketh unto you. And you should tell my father of all my glory in Egypt, and of all that ye have seen. And ye shall haste and bring down my father hither. And he fell upon his brother Benjamin's neck, and wept. And Benjamin wept upon his neck. Moreover, he kissed all his brethren, and wept upon them. And after that his brethren talked with him. And the fame thereof was heard in Pharaoh's house, saying, Joseph's brethren are come. And it pleased Pharaoh well and his servants. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, Say unto thy brethren, this do ye. Lade your beasts, and go, get you into the land of Canaan. You go down to Egypt, you go up to Canaan. Not because it's north, just because never mind. The trip down to Egypt is literally you go down in elevation. It's not, they weren't thinking of like you look at a map and you go down, no. And take your father and your households, and come unto me, and I will give you the good of the land of Egypt, and ye shall eat the fat of the land. Now thou art commanded, this do ye, take you wagons out of the land of Egypt for your little ones, and for your wives, and bring your father, and come. Also regard not your stuff, excuse me, for the good of all the land of Egypt is yours. And the children of Israel did so, and Joseph gave them wagons according to the commandment of Pharaoh, and gave them provision for the way. To all of them gave he each man changes of raiment, but to Benjamin he gave 300 pieces of silver, and 5 changes of raiment. And to his father he sent after this manner, 10 asses laden with the good things of Egypt, and 10 she-asses laden with corn and bread and meat for his father by the way. So they sent his brethren away, and they departed. And he said unto them, See that ye fall not out by the way. And they went up out of Egypt, and came into the land of Canaan unto Jacob their father, and told him, saying, Joseph is yet alive, and he is governor over all the land of Egypt. And Jacob's heart fainted, for he believed them not. And they told him all the words of Joseph which he had said unto them. And when he saw the wagons which Joseph had sent to carry him, the spirit of Jacob their father revived. And Israel said, It is enough. Joseph my son is yet alive. I will go and see him before I die. And I feel like I'm going to read the other. I'm not going to do it this time. This time I'm not going to do it. If we get there, we'll read it. I just have this. I don't want to get. I wouldn't want to not have a reading of a chapter at the beginning of a study. Meaning, like if someone tuned in on Monday, I'd hate for them not to be able to hear 46. But I don't think we'll get there. I keep getting way too optimistic. There's plenty of reasons to linger in chapter 45. Maybe, I don't know. We'll see. Probably this will be the day when we get right through it, right? And we'll be looking for 46. Maybe I should go to 46. I'm so tempted. It's the genealogy. Okay. Partially. Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's just see what happens, okay? So, he loses all restraint. He's been trying to contain himself this whole time because it's important. He doesn't want them to just know who he is and dissimulate. He wants them to be themselves. He wants them to and they confess to him not the specificity of what they did, but their iniquity, their acknowledgement. They confess it before him, at least through Judah. But it's a thought that's running through all their minds. And so he weeps, and the house of Pharaoh heard. They heard the report of it, I assume. Where I suppose it could have been from an adjacent room. I'm not sure if that means that. So he says, I am Joseph. Doth my father yet live? I thought he knew that, but it's kind of interesting. I guess he's sort of reintroducing himself and starting from scratch. So he's like, I'm Joseph. Does my father yet live? And they couldn't answer him because they were troubled at his presence. They were so disturbed. Because it would be like seeing a ghost. They thought him as good as dead. They knew they sold him into Egypt. They just never knew what had become of the boy. Well, now we know. And he says to them again, and again, this may be, they were troubled at his presence. It may have been a little bit of disbelief also. Like just suddenly being confronted with, I'm your brother. They've feared this guy. And he's been kind of terrorizing them for a long time, for a couple of years, 2 years, right? Well, for a year, let's say since the last year, they came there and he accused them, and he's spake roughly to them, and he's threatening to take their brother away. He imprisoned Simeon, put him in chains, had him bound right in front of them. So, he is a fearful figure to them, and now he's suddenly saying things that are even more terrifying in a way. Yeah, suddenly this person you fear is claiming to be someone from the past for whom you hold a great deal of guilt, or on whose behalf, I don't know how to express that. But because of whom you are guilty. And they weren't ready for that confrontation. Sorry, I had something in my tooth there. That's a blueberry. Come near me, I pray you. And they came near, and he said, I am Joseph, your brother, who you sold in Egypt. Okay. And of course, this is the critical part here. Be not grieved nor angry with yourselves. Joseph has completely reconciled this, that you sold me thither. It was terrible what they did. But Joseph sees this as God. And so God makes all things work for good for those that love him, those who are called according to his purpose. And so he sees the whole thing as God's work. And that's true. A lot of in the will of God for me and for doing good to me, a lot of negativity can occur. And does. I've never been sold into slavery. True that. But I've experienced things that that remind me that I don't get a free ride through life. I have to struggle and fight like anybody else. Not entirely like anybody else, actually, because sometimes I feel like Joseph. I feel very favored. In many ways. I feel the blessings of God upon me in all the things I do. Maybe not everything, but well, that's why in many things I do. Let's just put it that way. In many things I do, you don't always detect it as a blessing. Not everything that God is doing is going to seem good at the time. Even this, because it is not necessarily an enjoyable experience to be betrayed and and all that. But like a lot of things, it builds character. Joseph had a cushy life. You could say he was in, it may have endangered him. Like I said, that the situation that Jacob kind of created with the siblings by favoring Joseph so much, you gotta be careful. That's why I said, I'm not condemning Jacob, but as a parent, you don't want to. You want to make sure you do not make room for envy. I know this is God's plan and all that, and of course, that Jacob, the blindness of Israel and the blindness of Jacob here, in some respects, is also that's the Lord's doing. He doesn't see his mistakes because he kind of has to make them, and that's part of the truth for all of us. We have to. Maybe that's not the right word, but it seems to be part of the plan that we should go out and make mistakes and learn from them. That we would be tempted and to learn from it. Now that is the ultimate, is to learn from temptation without succumbing to temptation. But even in succumbing to temptation, I don't like to have the same lesson over and over again. It's a real bummer. And when you succumb to the same temptation over and over again, you begin to feel like, well, what lesson am I truly learning here? Is there any lesson at all? Or is it just, I don't know. I still get messages from people occasionally who will say, like, that they still assert sinlessness from the point of belief. And I would say, yes, in the judicial sense. That Christ has bought my forgiveness and there's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. So I'm clear. When we have faith in Christ, we're clear. We're forgiven. But that doesn't mean we have a license to do whatever. We are free now from sin to be bondmen of God. You know, he doesn't free us for no purpose to just set us off. We still have to exist in God's world. We are not free agents in we don't get to have our own universe where we get to be God. You know what I mean? We have to live in the universe with God. Or maybe not the universe, well, what we think of as the universe. You know, the thing that the universe is in, which I'm not sure what that would be. You know, well, the point is, let's call it the conscious reality we exist in. We have to share it with God. We have to, as far as God did not bring us into the world for us to not be in fellowship with Him. And that is a temporary state for man. The man out of fellowship with God is not the permanent state of man that God has ordained, but rather that we should live in harmony with God forever. And that's the key, is that we have to submit to that, because that is what, and in that, there's going to be limits. God, we talk about God as being all powerful, all this, all that, right? All knowing. And these things are true, but God is also self-limiting. He limits himself. What he limits himself? We don't think so. Well, God cannot lie. It's impossible for him to lie. He limits himself to the truth. And that may seem like not much of a limitation, but it still is. We could do, because the thing is, we could do anything. If we do anything we want, an unlimited number of choices, possibilities, some of those are not righteous. And so we also have to submit to limitations. If you want to live forever, you want an unlimited life, you have to limit sin to nothing, actually. Ultimately, there can be no sin, because God will not tolerate sin. Not in what he has in store. We're not going to be like God and meaning we've eaten of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. We have taken on we were made in the image of God, and then we ate the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. We've taken on more of what God has. Maybe the serpent's a liar, but when they ate the tree, their eyes were opened and they had knowledge. So something happened. Didn't exactly, they were like God perhaps in that they knew good and evil, but not like God in that they would choose that which is good, as God does. If we want to live forever, part of believing in Jesus is submitting to him, at least in theory, to accept the notion of a sin-free life. Now, again, I'm not talking about that you need to do this in some way to be saved or something like that, or you have to. It's something you do to earn your slot. It's not like that at all. We're saved by grace through faith, that not of yourself, it is the gift of God. And the gifts and calling of God are without repentance. He doesn't change his mind. A lot of times we don't know what his mind is, and we think we do. And then it seems like God changed his mind, like Judas. Did God change his mind about Judas? He called him. Jesus said, though I have not called you 12, or chosen you 12, sorry, and one of you is a devil. Because the choosing doesn't always have to be for the same purpose. We always think of choosing as like God chooses us. It's like, that's a good thing. Yeah. As long as he's choosing us to salvation. Because the choosing to salvation implies the inverse. Which means because it's unavoidable, if you choose to save some, those you do not choose to save, you are also choosing to destroy them by choosing not to save them. I don't see how you could ever get around that, except by just not wanting to acknowledge something pretty logically true. God did send me before you to preserve life. For these 2 years of famine, there are yet 5 years, in the which there shall neither be earing nor harvest. I Suppose that means when the earring probably refers to the fruiting of the, like plants flower and then they fruit. Like flowering plants do anyways, right? First the flower and then the fruit. And so I'm wondering if the earring refers to when like a stalk of grain would flower and then begin to bring forth fruit. Let's look it up real quick in our good old Bible Hub companion here. Preserve life to your earring. Caris, a plowing. So it's nothing to do with what I thought. So that's more like planting or harvest. And I think that's, again, you could say like, well, isn't that what's causing the famine? If we don't plant food, we're not going to get any. Well, and I think what that's saying is, a lot of times it's more of a case of there's no point. You can plow, but it's not plowing like normal. You can plow, but you're just plowing up dust. There's no plowing time, no harvest time. Because there is a time for plowing. And it is weather dependent too. If you don't get spring rain, I don't know if you even bother to plant. If there was a drought, a multi-year drought, for 7 years, that's pretty bad. So they don't even really know how, again, Jacob and his sons don't necessarily know how long this is going to be. Where it was revealed to Pharaoh, and Joseph knows. They're just 2 years into a famine. You figure about it, if they're suffering from the famine, where Jacob had flocks and stuff, they must have all, the flocks not getting their grass, dying off, starving. Remember the image of the cows, the lean cows coming up and eating the fat ones? Probably losing a lot of animals. Otherwise, because that's what they would be. They would have. Well, we got our goats and stuff. We're gonna eat them, because Jacob wasn't a farmer. He probably trade for things like grain. Like like Judah trading the kid for the prostitute, the goat kid, by the way, the kid of the flock. God sent me before you to preserve you a posterity in there, because the famine would wipe you out. And of course, the famine is God's doing. The drought is God's doing. It's part of the plan of the world's unfolding. But again, and you say, well, why this, why that? And it's like, well, I always think of it in terms of this is the story God wanted to be the story of the world. Sometimes people will say things like, well, God has to do it like this because of that, or God has to do it like that because of that. Like there's things constraining God. And I try to avoid that kind of language, because a lot of things we don't know why God does it. But we could say, that it was his will. He deemed it so. This is the way he decided. I often say about this world that this is the way God decided the world should be. And it's not necessarily this is the best, because best is all subjective. Best to who? Best. Best is going to be, it's like, what are the results you want? Who is he trying to please? Us? No. He's got his own project going on. God is raising up sons. And the life we live in this world is critical, because we are, men shall give account for every idle word, for every sin. They shall be called to account. And part of living in this world is believing that that's not so. We're allowed to believe that. It's easy to believe that. Not for me per se, because I believe in the Lord, because he sent his power. I felt it when I received the Holy Spirit. So I'm convinced. But I know how easy it is, even being convinced, how easy it is to let the mind slip focus, to not keep our eyes on the Lord, to let our gaze wander elsewhere. Thank God he understands our frame. He knows our weaknesses. He was tempted in every way like as we are, yet without sin. But even so, in being tempted, he is able to succor, to give comfort to those that are tempted. To save your lives it is a great deliverance. He went from being a slave to being second to Pharaoh. And like he says, God has made me like a father to Pharaoh. And not like God, he took me under his wing like a son. No, he made me like a father. It may have been a young Pharaoh. When it said that, I thought, maybe Pharaoh here is kind of a young Pharaoh. There often were very young Pharaohs. Joseph being about 40 or 50, he would be perfect position to be a chief advisor, and and I could see, and he could have been a pretty wise young man. Maybe he was, when this first starts, he was like 20 something or whatever. And Joseph is a bit older. And he's got to be at least old enough to recognize talent, to be wise enough to appoint someone talented. But I don't think he would say he has made me like a father to Pharaoh if the Pharaoh was an older man. It's just an opinion. That's not meant to be definitive. It just seems to me. All right. Lord of all his house and ruler throughout all the land of Egypt. He, as we know, haste ye and go up to my father, saying, thus saith thy son Joseph, God has made me Lord of all Egypt. Last he heard, he was torn apart by animals. So that's, we know of Jacob's reaction. We'll get to that. He says, come, you will dwell in the land of Goshen. Thou shalt be near unto me, thou and thy children and thy children's children, and thy flocks and thy herds and all thy hast. What's left of them, I suppose. Like I said, if they're suffering from the famine, it could be that, like I said, here's another thing is like, you may eat of the flock, but you don't want, if you eat too much of it, your flock will diminish. I've been trying to think about this because I've been planning on upping my chicken. I'm going to build a bigger chicken coop, and I was going to try to keep more chickens. I was going to try to figure out, like, how many chickens do I need to keep to have a kill? I wanted to try to see, like, some sort of maintenance flock, like the way people do. Not just they used to, they still do. And, it's kind of complicated. But there is a certain amount of turnover that's allowable and a certain amount that's not. You can't eat all the chickens, and then you won't have any new chickens, or you won't have enough to produce, to maintain the flock of that size. And it's possible that they supplemented by trading for grain and such. I don't know, but, they have flocks. This verse, as I read this verse bugged me. That's what I'm talking about, because it's like, I kind of would think flocks and herds would be, well, again, like I said, maybe they had to buy quite a bit of grain, because even maybe the flocks needed grain. I don't know, to keep them alive. Who knows? Animals eat a lot of, Jacob, if he had big flocks, I don't think the 12 brothers could go down without, they went on asses. When you're traveling with a sack on an ass, you're not bringing enough seed back to feed large animals. I don't think so. Because if you understand how much an animal eats in a year, like, I have a dairy barn, and they used to basically fill that thing with hay to feed the horses and the cows and all that. So I don't know. I'm not an expert on animal husbandry, that's for sure. So he's saying, there are 5 years of famine lest you and come to poverty. Yes. Well, because eventually they would, again, you're spending all your money to buy that food that, maybe isn't being produced locally anymore. Your flocks are going a bit hungry. Maybe you have to supplement a bit. Maybe, I don't know. But, all the wealth that he built up was in livestock, and that could all be in jeopardy, especially in a continual prolonged famine of, years duration. That means, because that, when you have a multi-year issue like that, if you think about it, it gets worse every year. The problem gets worse. Like if your animals are eating up scrub on the first year, The next year, that's going to be less. Whatever they're able to forage is going to be even less every consecutive year because it's not getting the grow back it normally would. So there's probably more competition between the herdmen and all that. And, like I said, it is, if this is the right time, it could be, like I said, this could be coinciding with that Bronze Age collapse the historians talk about. And it definitely feels that way. Like when we go into, Joshua and Judges, it feels like you go back in time to something more primitive. That's how it feels to me. Because I feel like in Abraham's time, there's like this world he lives in that's much more peaceful and in some ways interconnected than you will see later on in the Iron Age, as they call it. And remember, there's iron in the Bronze Age. It's just a lot of things are made out of bronze in the Bronze Age. But the making of iron went way back. It's just that the techniques got better. I mean, because iron was known for a long time. There's ancient iron daggers from tombs of pharaohs. It was precious. And iron. That's because, like I said, back then it was much more rare. The smelting of bronze is much more simple. He kissed all his brethren and wept upon them. After that, a lot of kissing and weeping, and it's normal human emotions. It's funny because we don't really let people cry. I should, well, I don't, like you don't feel comfortable often in front of people. Like I've been in churches, and in some churches there's just no room for emotions to come out. Or people, a lot of times people think it's in poor taste. It's funny. Now, obviously, they wouldn't say that about Joseph here, but I don't know. I sometimes think people are kind of mean and cold. And so there's like if you have something, there's a tendency to look down. I caught this little line there. I don't know why. Anyways, I mean, I don't know. When someone just starts sobbing, it's like, obviously there should be a reason. And this is obviously a good reason. It's kind of like tears of relief is basically what I would call them. You know what I mean? And joy. I always said, my kids, one of the things I always, I did not allow crying, except if you're hurt, injured, or sad. It's got to be, but it's not over things like, I want that, or, that's a spankable offense, as far as I'm concerned. Crying and whining and all that stuff. And that's very different from these kind of tears. I mean, if it was genuine, again, I thought at first of sorrow. I don't know why, because this is obviously not a sorrowful moment. But I thought first of sorrow when I heard about all this, because I've had tears of sorrow, and regret many times. Things I regretted, things I, can overcome. And I'll tell you what, crying in front of other people, in some ways, it's very liberating. It's like, because you just drop all your pretense, drop all your defenses, and just allow yourself to feel things and to express it. I don't think people should be blubbering all the time, but sometimes there's a place for tears, even among men. That's funny. There's a strong cultural thing against men crying, and they say, I don't know. They've tried to, roll that back somehow, but it doesn't really work because it has to do with the people. You can't just tell people it's okay. And it's like, it's not okay because of the way people react. People don't like to see your emotions, and it's kind of a pity. Because especially at church. Church is a place where you should be with people who are akin to family. And I suppose that may be part of the problem, because the relationship at church, the society there becomes so important that whatever underlying thing, whatever yuck is underneath it, it could cause tears and could cause, that needs to come out, right? It needs expression. Oftentimes, it can be found to be actually harder to express it in a place like church because these are very important people in your life, perhaps, and, you're always having these good times and showing negative emotion like that. If it be called negative, maybe it's not. I wouldn't call it, because weeping is not always negative emotion, right? Because you could have tears of joy. And negative, I don't mean morally negative. It's just a sense of, well, some emotions are negative, like self-hatred and stuff like that. You despise yourself and you feel a sense of, I don't know, what's the word I want? Like if you feel worthless and all these things, a lot of times people do when they get depressed, right? All these feelings of lack of self-worth. We have a lot of reasons to regret sometimes because we've done things. We've been, we haven't been maybe lived up to what we think we could be in the Lord. But and as much as I find that tempting, I always think I could do more. I could do better. I could, more. I could, the things I'm working on, I could have done them faster, or I could be doing them faster. I could be more attentive, and while that may be true in a sort of a theoretical framework, they're like, oh, you could, but you kind of can't. Just like Joseph couldn't really control being sold down in Egypt. It was a bad experience. Had to be very terrifying. Thrown into prison, he's a young man. His own brothers selling him off to strangers. Then working his way up from the bottom and going right back down to prison. And then he starts running the prison again. So all the brothers get kisses and hugs, and they talk with him. Yeah, but people, if I didn't make the point clear, people at church, a lot of times people who are important to us in our lives, we don't want to open up because a lot of times we maintain this fiction of who we are. Like Joseph being that Pharaoh guy, the head honcho of Egypt. I don't know what to call him. When he was that guy, it wouldn't be appropriate for him to show emotions until he revealed his true self. Then they could understand, oh, you're Joseph. And sometimes the people around us don't know who we are. And so we maintain a facade for them so that we continue being who they think we are, right? What people do. They put up a facade to portray to the outside world, and at the same time, people don't know what turmoil is going on inside. How many people live like this? I've lived like that. Because you feel like I can't express myself lest I be diminished in their eyes. Lest in admitting my faults, they hate me. It should not be so. But it's true. Some people will hate you for your faults. Some people will hate you for admitting it. But it takes courage to recognize that those people aren't worth trying to please. They're not. We need to please God. And when we please God, those who love God will be pleased with us. When we make confession, honest confession in sorrow and weep over our sins, there will be people who hate you, who think maybe you're making a show, thinking maybe you're too emotional, maybe you're trying to get attention for all kinds of BS that maybe is not true at all, right? But you're doing you. Because it's not just about, it's very tempting for me at times, to just think about my religion as just between me and God, just me and God. But it's not. That's a very important part of the dynamic. Is me and God. God and I should say, right? I was used to make fun of music Christian music, I used to call it me and Jesus music. It's all me and Jesus music. And me first. I mean, I put that first on purpose because I feel like the music is so self-focused. It's always about me and God, me and God. I love you, I this, I that. And nothing wrong with saying, there's a lot of psalms like that. I will praise him with my, with my lips. But I thought, well, how about something more? Why does it always have to be about me? And that's why I did scripture songs, because I wanted stuff that was just from him. I wanted God's word to be the music, to be in the music itself, as opposed to just something that's, there's something to having music to assist you into getting to the mood, the proper mood to worship and getting the proper headspace for worship. That's all fine. Like I said, I think when I was young, I was more extreme. I was more, like when it came to music, I was extremely snobbish. I still am not very fond of pop Christian music, to tell you the truth. I don't hate it by any means, but I don't listen to it, that's for sure. I don't listen to much music except my own, honestly. I'm always writing new music, recording it, and then listening to it to try to get it right. Then going back and reworking it. That's what takes the delay. It's always the going back and reworking it. Add this, add that. I need a new guitar part, new this part, new that part. Got to sing it better. Got to do that better. Got to do this. Anyways. But the God and I part of your faith is very important. But also we are called into a body. We are not alone. It is not good that man should be alone. That's from Genesis, right? It's not good that man should be alone. I remember a friend of mine thought that God was also sort of hinting at himself. But I don't really buy that per se, because God is not alone. He never has been. He is sufficient unto himself, within himself. Obviously, because he's God. All sufficient is kind of part of the territory. It'd be interesting if God was, this is going to sound like blasphemy. It's not, but, bear with me. But it'd be interesting if God was not everything we thought. If he was slightly less all-powerful, that seems weird, but, I don't think it could be possible. I mean, like I said, he has some things he can't do. In that sense. He doesn't lie. He can't lie. So there is a limitation. And that's a glorious limitation. Imagine if God was truly unlimited. He didn't limit himself in anything. That's scary. I can't even conceive. I don't think we'd be here, honestly. Or maybe we would. Maybe it's just, it's just waiting to destroy us all. He's done it before. I don't think God is looking at us like that. But the thing is, we are begging for it. The earth is begging for correction, unfortunately. I think about the things that are going on with our own military. It's like we are begging for defeat. We've been losing wars since the 70s. In Vietnam, I remember Arnold Murray used to say that broke the back of communism. No, we lost that war. No one ever liked to admit it. We lost. We didn't win. The communists kept control of the country after we left. We lost in Afghanistan. It was pulled out and they took everything. When the enemy has the battlefield and all your effing equipment, sorry for the swear almost, all your effing equipment, you lost. Period. Possession of the battlefield is one of the marks of victory. Whoever's on the battlefield at the end of the day is the winner. We just keep losing. And we deserve every bit of losing we're getting, unfortunately. I wish I could say otherwise. I wish I'd say it was going to turn around and get better. I wish I could say that. I fight for that all the time. And that's the thing, is like you may think, well, Paul, you think it's going to get worse. Why do you even fight? Because that's what I'm here for. The whole point is to fight. It's the only thing to live for. To fight evil. Of course you fight it, even if you're going to lose. That's the whole point. I'm supposed to lose. But I'm supposed to put up such a nasty fight that they want to kill me. You know? I got to make their naughty list. So I say, I hope I'm making their naughty. I think I'm on a couple naughty lists. Good. Good. Yeah, I don't mind. When they shall have finished their testimony, the beast that ascendeth out of the bottomless pit shall make war against them and overcome them and kill them. We're going to lose the war. I'm not talking about America in that sense. I am terrified we will lose World War III. In a way, I'm not really terrified because I trust the Lord, but the terrors will come. You know what I mean? Don't be nothing terrified in your adversary, but on the other hand, there will be terrors. I'm just a human. I can trust God. I do. It doesn't mean, like they trusted Jesus when they were on the boat, but they still thought they were going to sink. You know? And again, it says in the book of Revelation, we lose. At least we lose that battle, that moment. He's going to overcome them and kill them. We will lose. But Christ will get the victory for us, after. But even so, that's the thing. We got to stand up for what's right. And that's the purpose. That's why evil almost exists merely for us to fight it. Merely for us to resist it. Because even though God does not sin, God does not lie, and he can't, but he could. He could. It's not like it's impossible in the sense of like incapable. He's only incapable in that his will and his constitution forbids it. You know what I mean? Because he forbids himself from doing it. But that doesn't mean he could, we could live in a world where God lies and cheats and steals. Not that God could steal from anybody, right? Or cheat. On some level, when God does it, it's not the same. And that may seem like double standard. Yes, there's a double standard because you don't think there's a double standard for God. Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. You're not allowed to have revenge. I do that. It's not saying revenge is wrong. It's like, no, we leave it to God. Because some things call for revenge. Things ought to be revenged. But a lot of times we take this sort of perverse satisfaction in revenge. It's like Joseph here. He could be tempted to revenge. It doesn't say so, but it would be in the cards. Certainly in imprisoning Simeon, I think there would have been some satisfaction. Remember, he was in prison for a couple of years. Several years, actually. Right? I think it was more than 2, right? When we figured that. Whatever. He was in prison himself. So it's not like he don't know his condition down there. He kept the prison for a while, so he knows it's well run. Or whatever. I don't know. Depends on what kind of prison it is. It's like some are worse than others. As today, as always. Pharaoh might have had a special prison for aristocrats and people who weren't. Just like today, we have low security prison, federal prison for like white collar criminals, and then the thugs all go into the, to the penitentiary down the road. Maximum security, barbed wire, and all that. And then the rich people go to the country club. Country club with striped pajamas, but still not exactly a country club, obviously, but. Much more, like being in high school, you can't leave or something like that. I don't know. I've never been to prison. I've never visited a prison. I've visited a jail, but never actually a prison where people who are convicted are kept, because jail is where you go await trial when you've been arrested and all that stuff, or await a hearing or something like that. I almost spilled coffee right on myself there. Okay. So, Pharaoh hears this, it pleases him because he loves Joseph on his own way. I say love, but whatever, Joseph has been, everything he hoped, everything he put into his care and under his authority, all the land of Egypt and the life of the whole country in his hand, and he's done splendidly. And so he's he's a mysterious person who's come to them as a slave. And like I said, slavery, this could never happen for a black person in the South. It wouldn't happen. You don't get to be vice president of the Confederacy. That just would never have happened. So it's a different kind of slavery. There's different kinds of slavery. And I don't think it was unique to America, but ours was different. And it got so bad because they had to justify it somehow to themselves. It's terrible. Terrible. Because in so doing, they had to dehumanize black people and look at them as less than human. That's why, we don't enslave white people or these people. They're too much like us. These different people, we can look down on them and see them as animals. And, and that way it's not violating our conscience. Well, not everyone felt that way, obviously, but that was the prevailing ethic, I would say. Not the view necessarily, but the ethic, what actually happened. They were treated inhumanely. And almost in like I said, because the people wanted to be good people, they almost had to treat them like animals, because otherwise they were enslaving the image of God. They were doing things they should not do. Because again, the Bible clearly, this is an anti-slavery passage. What they did in selling him into slavery was wrong. Like that, there's no question of that when you read the passage. Is this the first slavery thing we've really had in the Genesis? Well, we had Hagar. Well, we talked about Hagar, right? She's a slave. It was basically the wife. But like I said, Sarah gave him to Abraham. But for her, in some ways, that was actually her social standing rising. So, while it's not, the world they lived in was not a free and, liberated one, it was certainly people, they still had human kindness. It still had room for people to, redeem themselves or to improve themselves. So even Joseph as a slave could rise to such heights in the land of Canaan. And he was of a different race also, again, so they didn't dehumanize their slaves. They knew they were humans. Usually people dehumanize people for being enemies. That's why captives from like if you fought against another city or nation and you enslaved them, those slaves would be treated often differently. Especially the Romans, certainly war captives were treated exceedingly brutal. If they were enslaved, that was about the best thing that could happen often, compared to being, taken to the Colosseum for the entertainment of the rabble. Because some of the things they did to those people were unspeakably horrible. Unspeakable. It's not just the feeding of them to animals, but the ways they would feed them to animals. The games, the goofy things they would do, the merry-go-rounds of torture. The merry-go-rounds of torture is not far from describing, the teeter-totters of doom. They had all kinds of amusing ways to make people suffer. And I say that very sarcastically when I say amusing. It certainly is amusing in the sense of being far from, meditation and and thought. It's all visceral and blood and guts. So go to the land of Canaan, take your father, come here. I'm going to give you a wonderful place to live in the land of Goshen. It's already mentioned. Joseph already mentioned it. Funny, Joseph says to it, but then Pharaoh comes in afterwards. Well, because, he has permission to do things. But Pharaoh is all for it. And Joseph gives them wagons, and they go. He gives Benjamin 300 pieces of silver and 5 changes of instead of a change of raiment. He gives him 5. It's nice to have changes of clothes. We have so many. It's like we forget sometimes. A lot of times in the ancient times, people wore the same clothes every day, or maybe didn't have a change. You mean new clothes? They get new clothes. A lot of times you don't have that. 5 changes, that's wealth. Changing clothes. So it's one of the ways in which we are exceedingly wealthy. I mean, I have all kinds of things which are the equivalent of slaves. Machines that do my work for me. Like I have something that pumps water out of the ground, so I have to send some man with a bucket to fetch water from the river. I have machines in the room behind me that will launder clothes and dry them. One need only put the clothes in and press the button. I don't have to have some washerwoman in my employment to keep myself in clean clothes, or to draw water for me, or any number of other things, or to carry message. I need a servant to carry my Bible study to all the people who want to listen to it. Where's my slave? Where's my messenger? Where's my man? Again, here it is. I'm staring at him right now. Not me, but the computer in front of me. This is my servant. What a powerful servant. It's like Joe. It's, in many ways wiser than Solomon. Or certainly has more knowledge, right? I don't know how wise the computers are, but, what I'm saying is sort of through the computer, I can access more wisdom. I mean, look at through this machine, I have this Bible Hub piece of the website software containing every tool that I have, that I spent hundreds of dollars obtaining before the internet. Well, even when I bought all those, the internet was a thing, but it was in the early, I don't know if you remember what the early internet was like, but it was a while before Bible Hub got up there. Let me say that, all right? At least I think, I didn't know it, Also, the connections were so slow for so many years, it was like even loading a page with a bunch of text could take a long time. Actually, I do like, Bible Hub seems like a pretty lean website. I don't sense a lot, and there's ads, but I don't sense a lot of, I was about to look at their code. Never mind, we're not going to do that now. All right. I don't know, look at the source code some other time. All right, regard not your stuff for the good, you don't need to bring stuff, whatever he means by that, whatever extra, don't bring furniture, I don't know what. I don't know what they mean by stuff. Let's look it up. What is the word stuff? I think I know what that means, but, it's a very generic word. Oh, wait, I just want to know what stuff is. Article, utensils, vessels. Don't bring vessels and pots and pans and all that stuff. So those other accoutrements of life. The stuff. The stuff, all my stuff here. Sometimes I get sick of all this stuff, right? I think about that rich young ruler who had many possessions. In my country, I'm not considered rich. But in history, like I said, I have electric slaves, man. I got electric washing slaves, electric cooking. No one has to fetch wood for a fire. That's significant. How much time used to be spent in life just getting the basics that people need to survive? Just fetching water. I remember when I first moved out in the country, I met one of the locals, and they were talking about their mom, how she hated it out here. Because when they moved out here, for the first 10 years, she was walking every day with a bucket to get water. Because they didn't have a well. And there was a river close by, so down to the river you go. And, that's the way of the world for most of history. Now, we're wealthy. I finally got one of these little pocket computers, right? I got one of these. I mean, it's amazing. Right? It's not only a pocket computer, it's talking to the outside world. And you can talk to it. But, and all this has a downside too, obviously. But in the midst of it, we have a great blessing. And so, having these blessings, are we ready to walk away from all this? That's the thing, is that we have great possessions. Are we like that rich young ruler? Follow me, Ooh, sell you have. Ooh. Again, at this point, I don't think I never think that commandment or that's not commandment so much as a call. That call has a place and time. Sometimes it's time to just dump everything and go. Other times it's time to store up grain and build up your house. It's like I'm raising my children. I can't sell everything I have. I'd impoverish them. You know what I mean? Maybe when I'm older and I don't have people I'm responsible for, I will divest myself of everything and just become a naked man. I mean that metaphorically. Just without anything attached to me, except perhaps my wife. I'll give her up, not for anything, not for anything but death. Till death do us part, right? Okay, so Joseph gives them wagons, the commandment of Pharaoh. He gives them the gifts, sends them away. See that you fall not out by the way. Seems like a little bit of a nag there, right? Like, hey, don't fall out by the way. It's such an interesting thing that's there. Fall not out by the way. Don't have a disagreement. Don't, what is it that maybe because he's been away from them for a long time. He's the ruler. And what would he be thinking? Well, I think like he said, do not blame yourselves. Do not be angry with yourselves. God sent me ahead of you. God did this. Now, God didn't make them do anything evil. But again, what they intended for evil, God used for good. That's different. Okay. What the wicked often intend, and those who are even good, who when they do wicked, what we often intend for evil, God can turn for good. So our evil can be used for good. But God does not make evil happen. And I shouldn't say evil, I should say sin. He does make evil happen, because evil is just, look, the book of Revelation, all kinds of stuff. Look at the vials, the 7 evils that come upon the world. Evil as a destructive force, like an earthquake or anything, that's all evil. People often don't understand evil as, it's not really a thing. It's more like the absence of something, the absence of good. Or not the absence of good so much as the removal of good. Like not having a life ever is not exactly evil, but having life and losing it, that's evil. And evil has befallen you. And I'm not trying to that's just how the word is used in the Bible, because God says I create evil, and people often gotta understand that doesn't mean wickedness or anything like that. That means sometimes calamities come. And they're from God. And so in some ways, the calamity, the moral aspect of it was his brother's doing. And so I'm thinking he might have some thought for that. Like on the way, he's been revealed to them, and now they're heading home. And what's going to happen now that they're out of Joseph's presence? Well, maybe the recriminations will start. That was your idea. You said throw him in the pit. You said, again, and it would be so easy to just blame. Joseph perhaps feared that might be what they would start recriminating each other and blaming each other. And he's saying, and I suppose he's saying, hey, don't fall out. Don't turn on each other. Stick together. And that's important. Okay? Because that's the only reason I could think he would say that, because it has something to do with him. Why else would they fall out on the way? What would they have a division over? Well, yeah, it's that. The whole selling your brother into slavery thing, it's like, whose idea was that anyways? Well, because he just said it was for good. But again, knowing that doesn't necessarily make someone feel better about the evil they did. Like if I try to do something evil and the Lord turns it to good, I'm ashamed, maybe more so because of that. Because my evil is, because it's exposed like that, because God may be revealing to me, like I tried to do something evil and the Lord turned it to good. It shows how intimately he was watching my sin. And also that he had to take something I did and change it. That's not good. I don't want God changing things I did. I want to work in concert with God. I mean, I want to work with him. I want him to have me do things, that stand. You know what I mean? Whosoever heareth these sayings of mine and doeth them, he's like a man who built his house on a rock. We want to build things that stand up, that God doesn't undo. And even if he undoes it for good and for a good purpose, it's shameful to us. So his brethren would likely still feel ashamed, in spite of the fact that Joseph said, don't feel bad, God did it for good. Well, you did, all this, that's great and all. But I still sold you into slavery, brother. And I don't know how to just forget that. So, I can understand how that he would feel it necessary to tell them, hey, don't start eating each other. Because that's what people often do. Let's talk about church. You start confessing your sins. Now, I did this in church. I started confessing my sins. And people didn't like it. They were like, well, who does he think he is? Or, I don't know. I think the worst part was confessing to masturbation, because too many other people were guilty of it. They didn't like someone confessing it openly, obviously. Nobody likes that. When your sin, when someone else is weeping and confessing your sin, and you're just sitting there sternly judging them, you hypocrite. I received all kinds of judgment. I was not of God. I was blah 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 blah. I'm not saying I am of God. God didn't send me per se. I mean, he didn't tell me he was sending me. Maybe he did. You don't know, do you? I was like, I don't think I'm sent of God, but what do I know? In that situation. They didn't know, that's for sure. Again, watch out. People have entertained angels unaware, like it says. We should strive to treat people as we would like to be treated if we were in that situation, We are, and I think that's a lot of it, though. People don't like to hear people confess sins or show emotion because they are also wearing a facade. This often happens. Like I said, when you have people you care about, it's kind of natural. When I was having, there's, I can think of, there are things that when I struggled with them, I didn't want certain people to know, because it might hurt them or because it might affect our relationship. I didn't want them to know. But confessing is always better. And I think so, because it's like, if they can't accept me as God accepts me, because God has received me with all my sins. But if they can't accept me as God accepts me, then there's no fellowship. And that's the thing. We are called to fellowship with each other, and not only with God, not just me and God, not God and I only, but I and the brethren, God and the brethren he has given me. I and the children whom the Lord has given me are for signs and for wonders in Israel from the Lord of hosts that dwells on Mount Zion. From Isaiah. And Israel said, it is enough. Again, at first he didn't believe, his heart fainted because he didn't believe it, right? And then it is enough. And I guess we'll leave it there. We're out of time. Whoa, we're out of time. And, I could wax eloquent about this, but I think we're good. The narrative will suffice. Jacob is very pleased to find his son alive. And that's enough. That's enough. Enough what? Again, when people say it's enough, it's sufficient. It's saying like I'm full. Like, what more could I ask for? We have that kind of expression. I'm trying to give you an idea of the idiom. And when he says it is enough, it's like that fills me up. It's more than I could ask for. It was a kind of the metaphor, the figure of speech we would use, right? It's enough. Joseph is alive. I will go and see him before I die. Instead of dying in sorrow, I will see my son again before I die, and that has made him happy. Even if he lost out on 20 years of his life. And that's a lot, man. Like all the years from 20 to 40. is a significant time. I forgot the numbers. Forgive me on that. I know we had it figured out at one point, but you see how I am with that. I just don't. My brain doesn't pay enough attention to it. It doesn't mark it down in mental space as critical. Numbers and ages and all that stuff. I never. I was really good at math. I didn't like it, unfortunately. I wished I did. All right. Okay, we'll continue chapter 46 next time. Thanks for joining me. We'll be back again Monday, Lord willing, and everything else being equal. Till then.
And in that day thou shalt say, O Lord, I will praise thee, though thou wast angry with me. Thine anger is turned away, and thou comforted me. Behold, God is my salvation. I will trust and not be afraid. For the Lord is my strength and my song. He also is become my salvation. Therefore with joy shall ye draw water out of the wells of salvation, and in that day shall ye